Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Xner's Fireside Chats. I am joined with the one and only Mnmzzz, or Jeff from Dust 2. He's a writer over there. And you guys are going through a lot of changes, but Dust 2, how are you all feeling with all of the new stuff going on there? Are you feeling like you're getting a lot done?
The changes have been relatively productive so far. It'd be bad if it wasn't improving, considering we've gone from having, two employees to six or seven now, and we have someone whose job it is to be a full-time site administrator. So,
Hmm.
our numbers have been looking really good this site. I think we're on course for it to be our best month ever as a site, whether on Twitter analytics or site analytics. It helps that we just came off of Philadelphia 16 and a lot of exciting news in the NA space, but early signs are looking good for the site's like growth under Ryan. So I'm excited to see what the future holds with that.
Yeah, no, sweet. That's why I wanted to talk a little bit about it because I did kind of see you all running around doing a lot of interviews over at Frag 16. So I wanted to see how that was going in the early stages. But before we talk too much about Dust 2 specifically, I do want to get a little bit of rapid fire questions going on just to kind of warm us up into things because, we did it last time with Mike, and I feel like we got a lot of cool
Mhm.
answers with him. So now I do want to ask you to open things up. Is M&M's, is that your favorite candy? Is that the origin of the
No,
name?
not particularly. Can't say really like why I ended up with this name. It's kind of one of those things where I'm sure like some people can relate to it who have names that don't really make sense as like an esports personality. Like Note, for example, I know that's from when he was like a COD player. Halo Flyer with Jacob Halfman. I think that's probably something he had when he was a little kid. For me, M&M's was something I had when I was like a little kid. Like I think it originally was my like Minecraft name when I was like 12 or 13, and I just never, moved away from it, and now I'm kind of hard stuck with it. So,
That's the same way with me. I got this from like what is a plug and play like UB Funky game, which is like one of
mhm.
the characters. If anyone knows what that is, it's a very, very old game that was like out in the early 2000s. But yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah,
Got it from Minecraft and I've just stuck with it ever since. There you go. But
there you go.
where did the dog profile picture come from? Because you've had that
Uh,
for like 2 years steady or
yeah,
more
no, the
potentially.
dog profile picture. Honestly, like when I was crafting my Twitter brand, I wouldn't really call it as romantic as a brand. I just kind of say things on Twitter, but it's like originally I think I had a Vega Squadron logo, but I didn't want to accidentally be look like I was associated with the team.
Mhm.
Then I had a Liquipedia logo for a while, and then I didn't want to look like I was associated with them with some of my opinions. I didn't really want to put a picture there at first before I started going to LAN and being on camera because I just like, I don't want to be like DDoSed by people. It's
Yeah.
an eminent concern for all journalists in the space. And then I was just kind of looking around for a picture. And there's the dog from I believe Silent Hill 2. There's a secret ending where like the guy kicks open a door and there's just a Shiba Inu running the controls of the game basically from beside, and he's wearing like a little gamer headset. So I was like, oh, it's perfect. It's someone like running the show from behind the scenes. And I was like, and then I've just kind of stuck with it for years and years now. So
Yeah, no, I guess it holds up for sure. There you go. So next question, give me your favorite LAN event that you have covered so far as a journalist.
as a journalist, I think Frag 15, mainly because it was just my first big event I went to as a journalist. The area around Frag 15 was awful, but the venue itself was a really special venue. There's a big difference between when you have like a dedicated space to host lands at, like Philadelphia 16, and when you have to sort of make the best of the environment, like at Frag 15. And I feel like the fact that it was so isolated and you couldn't really do anything outside of the so for those who don't know, it was at a movie production studio in the middle of like an industrial parking lot. So you
Yeah.
couldn't it was like a 5-mile walk basically to anything of value around the area. So everyone had to sort of stay in the venue all day, and it created a really special environment to play and to work in because everyone's watching everyone do their thing, and no one can really you leave once at the end of the night, you come in the next day, and then you're just stuck there for the next 15 hours basically. So,
Yeah, and they had
yeah.
like good food there too, so there wasn't too much of an incentive to leave for that reason. So yeah, I definitely agree. You're kind of trapped in that building. It definitely created a little bit of a different environment than Frag 16, where
Yeah,
you're in the middle of
definitely.
downtown. You could literally walk to wherever you wanted to, if you wanted to go get some food or something like that.
Yeah, no, it definitely made it a little bit harder to network because there are certain teams that would kind of play their match. and then they would leave for like 3 hours and then come back and play their match and then
Hmm.
leave for 3 hours and then they would sort of be done for the day. Same with the little Frag 16 Chicago, where that was like they only wanted teams that be in the building when they were playing, so they would
Oh,
play and then
really?
immediately leave and not come back. Like I think Strife played one match at 10 a.m. and then their next match wasn't until like 7 p.m. So they literally just went home to their team house for the next like 9 hours and didn't do anything else, just hang out. So like
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know
um
that, but definitely
because
creates a little bit of a better
you
environment.
casted Frag Chicago, right?
Yeah, it was remote though.
Yeah, it was yeah, no, it was remote for those who don't know, but the way it was all set up was because of COVID and just because it was such a small venue
Hmm.
that they had, I think, like 6 or 7 setups, but they had like 16 teams. So teams would come in, play, and then because I believe it was GSL, they would like, they wouldn't have to play for a fair amount of time if they were on winner's side or if they were on winner's group, so they would just go for like hours and hours at a time.
Yeah, you just come back. I mean, Strife ended up losing that, so that could. I mean, obviously there's excuses there, but
Yeah. Well,
I
they
mean,
didn't. I don't think that was their full roster either then, and they didn't even if they stuck around, they wouldn't have been able to like practice on any of the PCs. They're all being used
yeah,
for officials,
right.
so
Yeah, I mean that's for sure a bit of a problem there, but
yeah.
nonetheless, I got next question, and this might be one that is more known by other people, but wasn't for me. How long exactly have you've been working for Dust 2? Because I've scrolled down through Twitter, and I did reach a wall there eventually around 2021. So I mean, how long
Oh,
have you spent working
yeah,
with them?
that's the old Twitter thing where you can only load 200 tweets. So if you run into
Oh,
someone who's like a
really?
chronic tweeter, you just run out. You got to go to use your advanced settings. So my first day at Dust CS was I think like December 2018. So I'm at the end of this year, I'll be approaching 4 years with the site,
Okay.
which is a pretty long time for anyone in esports to stay with like one publication, one
Yeah.
team, one project.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
but I mean, it's definitely been an interesting ride for better or worse over the past 4 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always appreciated your work and talking about that. What has been the your favorite piece of work so far that you've released for whether it be Dust 2, any other publication that you've supported in terms
Favorite
of releasing it?
favorite piece of content. I mean, hmm, I like any type of article where I get to do like a really like weird like a really non-standard deep dive on something. So obviously my most important would be the NA match fixing report.
Hmm.
But one article that I wrote in the last 12 months that I just really enjoyed writing for like my own purposes is there's this guy named Matt Davey1D David. He's
Hmm.
a like an American coach and analyst who works on like international projects. And he got signed to this team called Artisan, which is like a Thai org that has like Pan Asian rosters. And for some reason, some projects will just like click in my head, and I refuse to like just basically give up on them. And so I tracked like the ownership of this org to like the owners, and then the owners' parents, and then like it all comes together to realize that they're like that like the org is basically owned by a conglomerate of like the most wealthy people in Thailand or something, and it was just a lot of fun to do that project. Anytime where I get to interview teams, I think my first interview ever was with xCloud9, the floppy lineup, right when they had been benched by the org. That was a lot of fun to do. The interview with Extra Salt when they first entered esports was a fun interview. Um, a bit of an older one was when the whole Vireo Pro scandal, when
Yeah.
like the owner Colin, it was revealed he was like 15 and the org kind of collapsed under mismanagement. We got to do like a whole series of interviews, think pieces, and just coverage of that. So I'd say those are probably my four favorite to do, irrespective of importance to the scene.
Hmm.
So
Sweet. Yeah, I mean that I want you to hold on to those thoughts because I might have
okay.
some future questions down the line about some of your interview processes and things along that line. But now I do want to get talking about how exactly you got into esports in general because a lot of people have many different stories. Um, I know something personally about you is that you're
Mm.
a bit of I think you're a political science major if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I am.
And so, did that have anything to do with the fact that you were interested in esports and journalism, or was it just kind of a turn of fate that you hopped in
Um,
with Dust 2?
Well, I got my start as like a contributor at Wikipedia back. I think that would have been maybe late 2016, early 2017. And with that, I just kind of, it's like a free Wikipedia format website you can kind of edit. So started contributing for that side, it was just something I did as like a side hobby, and then I got more and more drew into the point where I was doing maybe like 5 hours of edits per week, if not more. So I started learning a lot, yeah, of teams, a lot of history very quickly. Started, talking to a lot of people on Twitter, asking for things like what mouse do they use,
Hmm.
when did they join a team, are they still under contract, and just over time, kept talking to more and more people. I would talk to the original Dust2.us team. So, Tolkien Fanatic, Note, Carbon Dogma, those guys. And with that, I kind of just kept getting pulled deeper and deeper into the scene until I eventually applied to Dust2.us. And that's when I kind of considered my start from being like an outsider of this esport to like an insider. I completely forgot about it because it was kind of unmemorable. For 4 months, I was the general manager of this, CS:GO manager rather of this esports org called Accelerate that had a MDL level roster in I think season 27. It was AGM, Sidestep, Dangerous, I believe gosh, Calm and Nerf McFadden.
Now, is that the Elevate? I think they have a South American team, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the same
Their
one?
so their CEO actually, interestingly enough, so Accelerate CEO Justin Tran kind of ruined Accelerate, which was his own org, so it's his prerogative
Okay.
to ruin it, right?
Yeah.
And then he went on to become the CEO of Elevate,
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So and
which is
Elevate is the
actually
team that has the South American
I
org,
think they yeah
or at
they
least
I
used
believe
to.
they at least used to like a low
Hmm.
level one with like Cuts Moretz, if anyone knows, he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a NA advanced player. It was funny with that actually. The owner of Accelerate like came in and he was looking to update something on Wikipedia. And then out of the blue, he's like, I don't really know anything about CS:GO. Can anyone tell me like if I'm like looking to upgrade my team, like what I should do to make my team better?
Hmm.
And I came at him with like this whole spreadsheet of like players who I thought could like improve his team in various roles. And I think because he was kind of looking for people to do free unpaid labor in esports, he's like, wow, I really like these ideas. Would you like to be the manager of my esports org? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Like first opportunity in esports, I'd love to. And it was mainly like a pretty frustrating time because
Yeah.
he was pretty resistant to listening to like his employees. Which is funny because he had a knack for listening to them at the right time, but then when like changes needed to come up, he kind of was like, because he had a team that would go on to become Team Solomid's Rainbow Six team. He had a PUBG team that would be signed by Ents. Obviously, AGM went on to have a pretty successful career in Valorant to this day with Complexity. I believe we had Wizro briefly, who's a famous Smash Melee player. I think
Yeah.
he's signed with Team Envy now. So like the people he had around him, suggested good teams for him, but he never really had a handle on like the finances or the like actual managing of the team structure. So it all kind of collapsed around him. And I believe he also had a Call of Duty pre-franchise like league spot that also he lost because he didn't pay the players. But so
Oh.
he's an interesting guy, and I
Yeah.
kind of
Is
yeah,
it the
I'm very
same one?
interested.
I is it the same one that wasn't playing their employees, right? With I don't know how close you listen to some of the like Richard Lewis's podcast stuff, but he was talking about that recently. I
The
think there
Noble
was.
guy.
Oh, that's Noble, right? And
Yeah,
all of
that's
that
Noble. I
like
mean, they're
tier
all
two old MDL teams
yeah,
that were kind of relevant.
all these bedroom org
Yeah.
people who all these like Berkeley types, they all flock together. They
Hmm.
all go to Ivy League schools or prestigious no, liberal arts schools or
Yeah.
business schools, and they all kind of talk to each other and share ideas about esports and how
Yeah.
they are going to be the next one to break through. But
No doubt.
it was definitely an interesting experience, and I met a lot of people
Hmm.
through it, which I think was more valuable than anything that the org itself gave to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could definitely believe that. Um. We kind of talked to and jumped around it just a little bit, but I do want to
Yeah,
talk a little bit more about your time in Dust 2, because you did work with some really experienced North American people. Like you kind of mentioned it briefly there, working with Note, working with Carbon Dogma. Those were
mhm.
maybe your introductory people into the inner realms of esports. But I mean, how did you utilize that sort of experience? I mean, what exactly did they teach you? maybe in terms of your like journalism process, your interview questions, or anything like that. I mean, what sort
Um,
of experience did they provide for you?
I mean, so like the way it used to work back in like the good old days of Dusty Us, 2018, 2019, is you'd come in as a new writer and they would just kind of tell you to do like to read a couple articles and do an article on your own, and
Mhm.
then they would just beat the ever loving shit out of you. It'd be like, this is wrong, the tensing of this is wrong, this is incorrect detail, you didn't format this correctly, you're missing an
Yeah.
article ref here. And they would just kind of break you down and mold you into like a better writer, and so that
Yeah.
was definitely a valuable experience. And it kind of explains like why Dusty US, especially back in those days, had a very like house style of how articles were written. 2 sentence, 3 sentence long intro paragraphs, article ref, second body, then roster, then outro text, and
Yeah.
all articles are formatted like that. Because there was definitely like a Dusty as house style of how and a style guide of how things are supposed to be taught and written. Obviously working with Note, he's watching him grow up watching him grow in the space has been,
Hmm.
incredibly rewarding, because he is one of our he is one of our luminaries. He is one of our best journalists in the scene, and inspiring in that sense, in the fact that, he's gone on to basically from us rubbing shoulders to being a senior writer at HLTV, frequent podcast guest, uh constant person on Maui Snakes broadcast or podcast. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely been intriguing to work with him. And then Tolkien Fanatic, he was a very he taught me to be a very iconoclastic journalist, in a sense that you don't really compromise on like the factual nature of a story, and you don't really add a bunch of clickbait and like clickbait titles. You don't add a bunch of stupid questions. You just kind of get right down to the meat of what we're reporting on, because that's kind of how he envisioned esports journalism, was very serious and very to the point, and that definitely influenced the way I approach esports now. So I'd say those two are pretty influential in my approach to esports.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about Joe in the future, but it's good to know that also offered you do a lot of value. And now, and
Mhm.
again, I kind of want to talk about Note more so because, like you said, you rub shoulders. Is that something that you're interested in doing? Moving forward, and trying to maybe broaden your horizons with like journalism, maybe work for other publications potentially in the Counter Strike realm, or is it
you
Dust 2
know
kind of your home for now?
I mean, it's like I've invested so much time into the Dust GS as a project and
Hmm.
as sort of a vision for like NA journalism. I don't really know what the future will hold. If Dust GS continues to exist as a product, I would like to stay on with it. Um, if it comes to the point where Dust GS maybe is retired as a brand, I don't know what would be next for me. Whether that's going on to a site that does more broad esports coverage, trying to work with HLTV, going independent. It just kind of depends on what happens. But the investment that has been brought in to support Dusty Us makes me feel that it's sort of the best place for me right now, and the opportunities are able to give.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
even outside of things like salary, it's kind of a nice place to work when when it's your site, as essentially, than having to go into a new environment. So I'd say for now, Dusty S is definitely the place I want to be, and that's where I want to cover esports.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about that, because you have, you know, you mentioned a little bit of a trial by fire, right, with your early journalism days, and
Hmm.
you do see limited turnaround, right? Like you have yourself as a long-standing Dust 2 member, you had Note as a long-term Dust 2 member, and I imagine that his only motivation for leaving Dust 2 was that he was moving upwards, right? So I mean, do you think that that sort of harsh, but like again, like I said, trial by fire, sort of movement from you all as like a core group of journalists helps out in terms of like building up a nice and coordinated affair of journalism or
I mean, there's definitely Dusty as journalists you don't remember, people like Sweat, people whose names you wouldn't remember, like Sweaty
yeah,
Carrot,
yeah.
or I don't want to like speak out of school about some of these people, but there's people we brought on for trial who would only last like a month and then would just disappear from esports entirely.
Because
Um,
because of the nature of harshness, or was it just
I mean,
wasn't for them?
honestly, it's like money.
Mhm.
It's money. It's the type of work you're doing. It's the harshness of it too. I mean, we were never like it was never like hazing at Dusty US when new writers would come
Yeah.
on, but it was always kind of like we had to believe you had some like core competencies as a writer to begin with. We were not going to like waste our time on someone who doesn't who we don't see potential in and
Yeah.
who isn't willing to, because the money was never good enough to the point where it's like you work it just cynically because you want to like make some Skrilla in esports. It was because
Yeah.
you loved NA esports.
Mhm.
And if you didn't love NA esports, like you weren't gonna be willing to write articles about, about premier teams, about advanced teams,
Mhm.
about these small events because it's not you don't when you're a junior writer, you don't have the connections to be publishing like big reports. So you kind of are doing like nose to the grindstone, like coverage. And a lot of people aren't turned. I feel like are turned off by just doing like coverage of things that are happening in the scene. But that's kind of how you build up your street cred as a journalist. I think Thorin said, or maybe Richard Lewis, or probably both of them, honestly, because it's sage wisdom. Is
Mhm.
like, no one cares what your opinion is until you've proven that you have like some level of competence at just reporting like factual occurrences, and people are willing to come out and say, yes, this opinion is grounded by the fact that this person isn't a complete idiot. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
No, that makes
people
sense.
want to go, some people want to go straight from like, I'm joining my new publication to be opinion. Why NA is going to have a great 2022. Me with 15 followers on Twitter thinks this. And it's like, that's not gonna, move the needle in any direction because no one cares who you are. And it's like, people just need to like work the daily trade until they build up a reputation.
Yeah, you got to do a couple coverage reports before you
Right.
release
You need to
pillars of
talk.
sand.
Well, because you need to talk to the players and just be like, "Hey, what's going on with this team? Why are you leaving? Why are you
Mhm.
joining? What do you mean by this comment you said on Twitter about the team?" It's like people aren't gonna like spill the beans to you about about like match fixing or why like what's up with their org or what's up with their personal lives until you get to know them. And you can't just slide into someone's DMs and expect them to be like, "Whoa, you work for Dust Studios? Yeah, let me go ahead and tell you everything that's going on in my personal life." Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't work like that in any journalistic field at all.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely have built up a nice bit of street cred, that's for sure. So it's good to see and good to hear that that sort of stuff for you. But I mean, I guess that's for the most part. I guess I do want to talk about one more thing.
Hmm.
And this is kind of something I mentioned with Mike, who's obviously a huge NA fan. So I love that for him. I love him for that, I guess, is what I meant to say. But um, you're hopping into what is kind of the introduction to the Valorant era and all that shifting going on, the mass exodus of like advanced and premier players. So that's kind of like your core group, and I'm sure you know a lot of those players that are in that scene right now,
Hmm.
because that's kind of like who you as a journalist probably grew up with, right? So
Right.
losing all of those sort of players, did you ever feel any sense of not necessarily abandonment, but did you ever feel any desire to maybe move on more so, focus on something else, rather than
Honestly,
journalism, or was it just a
we'll move
dedication
on
to the
from
project?
journalism. I mean, I have other, it's not Dust 2S obviously isn't my full time
Yeah.
job, so it's never to the point where I need to leave this to go do something else. It's something I do just as a passion project.
Okay.
It was definitely hard for a while when Valorant first released. So you were doing more articles about players leaving to Valorant than anything else, especially like of star players and players who we believed would be the next generation of talent.
Hmm.
Like most people, I played Valorant in the beta and I enjoyed it, but if anything, it just kind of made me want to play CS:GO more.
Yeah,
It's like
I feel that.
even now, obviously there's sort of like a culture war. There's like a culture war about it where some people are like, "Oh, CS:GO fans are so ignorant. They're always talking shit about Valorant." But for me, I've just never had any incentive to watch any other esport or get involved in any other esport other than CS:GO, and
Hmm.
I couldn't tell you why. Maybe the game just doesn't intrigue me with like it being an ability shooter. Maybe it's the fact that I think the esports scene is kind of a joke right now in the sense that you don't really know who the best team is because they only play, one event every 3 months, and for some reason
Yeah.
they assume that's a sustainable model to the future. Maybe it's because I see that a lot of the players are players who were, awful in CS:GO and were at the end of their rope, and now they're, tier 1 stars, and it's
Yeah.
like if there's an esport that rewards people who couldn't hang at the premier level and now they're the best in the world, what does that say about the esport as like a product of a
Yeah.
if the skill floor is that low and the ceiling is that if the ceiling and the floor are approaching each other, that's obviously not good for an
Hmm.
entertainment product. And I just think like Valorant just has so much nonsense going on without it. Like the community is insufferable. It's always just like it's just, it's just children running around. It's people, they're soft as hell. They're like posting thirst traps. It's just, it's like the worst of NA's like streamer culture from 5 years ago, all wrapped into a new esports product without the upside of, having more adults in the room who come from 1.6.
Hmm.
And it's just hard. I don't envy the journalists in Valorant either because they don't have like basic things like demos yet, so you can't go do demo
Yeah.
reviews. The streams were very basic for a very long time. Riot has a very tight lid on like what you're allowed to basically report on. Orgs are not very willing to talk to you. They all have a very like an air of pretension about them, and even though that they're the same org that was like a tier 3 org in CS:GO, they're I've heard stories about them like being very demanding with publications about what they can and can't say, what comments they're allowed to publish, what's allowed to be like on the record even after it's being said this is on the record. Oh, never mind. But if you want to
Hmm.
keep getting coverage from us, or keep being allowed to talk to us, let's walk back those comments. It's all it just all feels very inflated and I guess cynical to an extent. So
Hmm.
it's never really interested me as a game or as a scene I'm really interested in covering.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to add on to all of what you just said because all of it's incredibly accurate. But I mean, as a commentator, right, you just see Sean and DDK get pretty much ousted from what would be their only, like, they're not going to hop on a Knights broadcast, right? So if they can't work
No,
VCT on the major lands, then what on earth is the point of them as what
it's
I would
so
imagine
it's
is the best duo, right? Like that has to be the best duo in
yeah,
Valorant.
it's just so odd how the scene goes from like tier 3 just straight into tier 1, and there's no relog events, there's no
Hmm.
there's no ECL, there's not you're either playing these meaningless 10Ks or
Yeah,
you're playing in the big
Mickey Mouse
VCT
tournaments.
circuit. And Riot doesn't even really want the big teams to play the little events because it's meant to
Yeah,
be for the grassroots scene, but it's not sustainable and it's not very interesting either because you have like these teams that play the Knights events and then they go to the VCT and then they win and people are like, "Whoa, so shocking. Let's write like 30 articles about it." But we
they're
could
just
have seen this
practicing more.
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have seen this coming, one, because they practice more, two, because they actually get to play they get to play an event like more than once every 3 months. And three, these teams don't have any time to interact. So you're not even like all the conclusions are going in blind when a team like the Guard plays a team like Envy or Optic or whatever.
Hmm.
They don't really interact that frequently. So it's like or when you see like 100 Thieves or TSM get knocked out in like an open qualifier, people are like so shocked by it. Well, of course they're shocked because Riot hasn't set up opportunities for people to like for teams that actually play each other outside of like their internal circuits, which
Yeah.
is just very frustrating if you want to like actually get interested in the esport.
Yeah, I mean, if it's essentially like an open qualifier, we obviously know how many upsets that can bring in. So yeah, it's
Right.
a whole nother can of worms, and I have that equal disinterest in a lot of it. That's for sure. Um, but I guess we can move on a little bit. And I want to talk about maybe the creation of what was more so your personality as of what I feel like is recent in terms of trying to maybe promote yourself and your brand, like you mentioned earlier. Because I know, I feel like a lot of this was kind of birthed with Max Rounds 30, kind of showing your face, hopping on more interviews and stuff like that. At least
Yeah.
for my experience, because again, I came into the scene around 20 during COVID, basically,
Hmm.
and so for me, that was my introduction to you, and I feel like I got to know you a lot more through that. So, how did Max Rounds 30 come to be, and are you trying to utilize that to try and at one point, build
I
a brand?
mean, the hope would be we would eventually publish another episode of the show. It's been unfortunately 7 months since our last episode. Oh, I know, I'm with you. Like
Yeah.
we're of the same opinion. It
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
it's very hard to assemble three people to regularly
Oh
film,
yeah.
3 or 4 people to regularly film, produce, publish a podcast. When I'm at best a talking head, and I'm just incapable of like setting up like an OBS or a vmix, and so I
Right.
need someone to kind of do that for me.
Hmm.
Um, and with no really no promise of financial compensation, because we're never going to make a Patreon until we are actually like consistently big enough to
Hmm.
justify that. Um, it was definitely nice to finally have a podcast. So I will say, like, I met Coy and I met Jacob Halfman through that, just because I was trying to find like good people to be on a show with. And Jacob Halfman said he could produce, and then he ended up being a very smart person. And Coy, of course, is a very smart person. So we had like a very good role balance in season one, where it was a coach, a caster, and a journalist. Um, but I don't, whatever the future holds for that, we're still actively trying to bring the show back. It
Hmm.
probably will be me and maybe some new cast members, but it was definitely nice to be able to build my brand beyond the written word,
Yeah. No, I mean
in the
that.
sense that until you de-anonymize yourself, like you're
Hmm.
not really gonna like take off.
Yeah. No, I mean I definitely enjoyed it, and again, like you said, I hope that we see some more episodes coming in forward because it was. I feel like your dynamic. I didn't watch the recent one. I think the most recent one was with Note yet, but
I
I
believe
mean,
so. Yeah, that was, well, recent as in back in August,
back
but
yes,
yeah.
back 7 months ago, right? But when I did watch it with Koi and Jake, I feel like you guys did definitely have the big brain of Koi that always had some sort of fresh opinion, and then you all to discuss it. So
Hmm.
it's very good. It
Well,
was a
yeah,
very good set.
he's very like he's more intelligent than people. I think he's more intelligent than he gives himself credit for, and
Yeah.
that
Yep.
people in the scene give him credit for. Like, he always has ideas that just feel holistically true when he tells you about like about his opinion on players, his opinion on
Yeah.
teams, his opinion on the meta. We once got into it because he believes roles are dead, and I'm still a very like role purist person, but I'm kind of leaning towards his opinion now.
Yeah.
I think he's just been someone who's gotten incredibly unlucky in the sense that a lot of the European orgs he's worked for haven't valued him as a thinker, and as like
Hmm.
someone who's willing to like come in and change things up. I mean, key example of that is a team like Finest, who has spent the last 3 months being completely just new player, new player, new player, new coach, new player, new player, new player. Are we a Swedish team? Are we an Israeli team? Are we a European team? No clear direction on the project. And Koi was someone who came in with Golden and was going to give the team direction, but they're too eager to have results now rather than build towards something like aspirational as a team. And I mean, that short-sightedness is kind of a big issue I believe he's had in his career with like mouse sports too, when we're just going to get rid of everyone who is associated with the ROPS era of mouse and bring in new people. But he was definitely an anchor on the podcast, because I would say my weakness is my knowledge of like the game itself, the granular details of like why players do what they do, um, what goes into building a team. Other than, like, for me, it's always my big areas are who's a skilled player in a particular role to fill a gap, or what's a good personality mix on a team, or what coach do I think can elevate a team, where he can tell you like literally this person is very good on these kind of executes on these bomb sites on
Hmm.
these situations, and that's why he's a good fit. And then obviously Jacob is just a eloquent speaker, so he would come in and um, give good details just from someone who watches the game a lot as a caster, and is able to give just like snappy commentary on what's going on in the server.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean definitely agree. It was a good little mix that you had there, and I mean Koi is one of the harder working people that I know personally in the scene. So
He's insane. It's unreasonable actually
yeah.
how many jobs he's willing to take on at once. I think now it's up to like doing three teams that
Hmm.
he's Face It, he's Davenport, and he's always doing side projects. So it's
Yeah.
like he's probably one of the hardest working people in the scene that
Hmm.
doesn't, in terms of like what he's willing to commit himself to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel like Mouse did him dirty because I mean I'll always think this. Rops, that guy was phoning it in till the
Oh,
end, man. And he just
he
didn't
was a
have the
mega
best
baiter. Yeah.
player, right? He didn't have the best player. He's in it to the end, right, all the way up into it, and then immediately you see Mouse bounce back when they obviously don't have him and bring in players.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that team was dead when Rops was gone, and then the fact that they even made it into the group stage of what was it, Kato, looking pretty
Mm.
good. I was that's when I knew. I was like, man, Koi literally had nothing to work with. Uh,
Yeah, there was nothing really going on there. And I mean, it's like I don't even. My understanding it wasn't even like the team's decision to get rid of him. It was the org decision just wanting to be like, we're gonna completely start
Yeah.
fresh for you know, and look where they are now. It's
Hmm.
like they've already benched a player, they've already brought a new player in. I don't know. It's very frustrating
Hmm.
the way the scenes the way European teams kind of treat assistant coaches as sort of like accessories where you can
Yeah.
just kind of put them in, take them out, do whatever you want, short-term contracts, not really part of like the team's vision, just there to provide a little, an extra mile of effort, like
Hmm.
rather than actually like this person's going to be a long haul part of our vision as a team.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree for sure. But now I do want to talk a little bit about the kind of the roller coaster, the amusement park, if you will, of North American CS and kind of its highs and lows.
Yeah.
As we've just recently discovered some of those highs and lows. You get the Strife victory for Frag 16, and obviously a little bit of a issue there with the 6C drama going on there
hmm
directly after. So I mean, does it ever get exhausting to kind of work in this space that almost
I mean,
consistently disappoints you, or is it something that you've been able to muster up so much energy or maybe just numbness to it?
it's like the thing is, it's like I mean, there's 3 players who and I tweeted about this, I believe, last night. Like, there's 3 players who I believe are, like, the perfect symbol of every problem, but also every, like, aspirational goal you have in North America.
Hmm.
You have Clasia, you have Sixy, and you have Cynic. All 3 incredibly skilled players, all players who have never been removed from a team for for a lack of their in-server performance. All players who have been able to take on different roles. Danny was trying to be an opera, last year with Triumph. David Cynic was moving on to being like an IGL at in that Orgulous version of Triumph.
Hmm.
You have Clasia, who can basically do any role he wants. He's just such a skilled rifler. Like, I'm sure you could put him anywhere and he would thrive. But it's always just the out of server bullshit and the out of server excuses and the out of server drama that always brings these players down. And it
Hmm.
does get kind of exhausting after a while where it's almost like, I mean, obviously the drama is good for the site and like it helps you kind of it helps break up a monotonous sort of news cycle, but it does get like predictable after a while. Nothing really changes fundamentally in NA. It's always like a new player's turn to be the troublemaker, to be the rogue, to
Yeah.
it's to cause problems. There's always going to be a new org who doesn't pay their players, a new player who gets cut for out of server bullshit. There's always going to be someone associated with like match fixing. There's always going to be uh some tournament organizer who has a shitty format or doesn't run their event correctly. It's all very like, but it's kind of, I think that's kind of how it just esports is in general. So it's not like if you
Hmm.
want to, you kind of know what you're getting into when you come into esports, and um that's kind of what you get what you get what you pay for in that sense, like.
Yeah. You make your bed. That's for sure. It's,
Right.
it's just the consistency of it. I mean, I'm with you. It's oftentimes you see the same players. I mean, I've been like a Clasia fan since he was first in like kinship back at season 34. This was again when I first started casting, so I've kind of watched his career, and like I noticed him in Secret Club. That was his first season in at the time it was MDL, right? And that guy was
I believe so,
crazy,
yeah.
90 something ADR in his first season of MDL. And so I thought for sure this guy was going to be crazy, and then you start talking around and you do hear some of the issues out of server that go on, and it's just like, man, if you could just buckle down on that. I thought that was going to be the case with RBG, right? You think that one of these players is going to start. It was the same thing with 60. I thought the turnaround was going to be Strife. You think that finally things are going to change. He's going to buckle down, and then issues still arise. So it's just
Well, it's
a
like,
it's just a bummer.
yeah, it's like the hardest part, like the way you live in like a flat circle and time is just a flat circle and all events kind of just repeat themselves, is when a player has like a dramatic blow up on Twitter or they get kicked for some dumb shit they did, and they immediately go to Choco Check or Choco Check or Rebirth or Gaiman or whatever tag they take at that time. And it's always like this circular thing where you're like, why did you go to Choco Check? It's like, oh man, I'm just such a loser, man, and I ruined my opportunities to be a professional, so I'm gonna go join Choco Check where because they don't practice but they win, and I think it's a good way for me to just make some money and
Hmm.
grind out and just kind of hang out with some nice guys, even though even though everyone leaves that team and they're like, yeah, Carson's actually a toxic asshole. But like they always say, they always put up an eminence front when they join that team and say it's just 5 guys who like just hanging out and playing some CS:GO and they're winning events without practicing, and that shows that NA's a garbage heap. But it's like, I mean, you think about it. Sixy has been on Choco Check. Klazia has been on Choco Check. Whippy from Russian Whippy,
Yeah.
when he left his team, he went to Choco Check. When Klazia left for RBG, he went to Choco Check. When Cynic was there, Cynic was there even before. That's a second stay at the Hotel Choco Check. It's like all these players just sort of use Choco Check as their me angry no talk box. Like they literally use it as their timeout corner when they want to keep skin in the game, but they don't want to actually like improve on their core on their personality flaws. And it's like it's so frustrating because there's more players than I've mentioned who have done this shit where it's like they never learn. They always just go to a new team, get cut, and then go back to Choco Check. And it's very like, and you ask them, it's like, well, the team is actually good, and you're like, no, that's not the point. Like, it's not a team that values esports excellence. So it's like, if you value esports excellence, why are you wasting your time on that team? So I mean, that's definitely probably the most frustrating aspect is just players literally don't learn. But then you kind of do have to remember, okay, they're still like 19.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
the most scary thing was when like Snakes returned to the scene recently,
Yeah.
and I was someone who watched him when he and Graham and Exceed and MCE and Voltage were all playing on Soar, and that was in 2017. And now we're 5 years later, and he's still not even 20 years old yet. And I'm like, okay, like holy shit, the fact. Like I keep getting older, but all the players kind of just all the players are like frozen in time, whether like they're all still incredibly young. So I
Yeah.
try to be patient with them, but it's also just like some of these players like they know they have publicly gone on the record and said Choco Check is either tied to match fixing or they troll or they don't take the game seriously, and then they just kind of rebound to them like
Mhm.
when they sloppy seconds. It's always like it's very dumb, and NA players are very dumb in that sense.
Yeah. No, it's like they just get the flash from Men in Black, and then they just forget all of the
Right.
the previous events that have taken place on that Chocolate Check roster. It's wild. I'm hoping that isn't true here for 60, although I think it might be. We'll have to just wait and see.
Well, they added Garfield recently, so I don't know if that means like Danny's not joining that team, or if they're gonna like get rid of someone else to make space for him. You really never know because
Hmm.
it is a team that doesn't really like to play it straight and sort of just like tell you like what's going on.
Yeah, you just
Even now with an org, they don't really have a very like rich presence for as a journalist like finding out what's going on. The whole charade they had for a while where they're like, oh yeah, Ogre is totally coaching our team. Exotic isn't going anywhere. CJ is totally a starter. It's like everything is you kind of have to dig deep with that team and find out like what's actually going on, and it's kind of not really worth your time to talk to them to try to
hmm
figure out what's going on.
yeah, yeah. I definitely can see where that takes place.
Right.
Ugh, yeah, but now I want to close things out because we did talk about some of the kind of glaring structure issues. I mean, obviously Choco Check or gaming Gladiators is potentially one of them, just kind of being that home for players that have become lost again.
Mhm.
So I mean, I feel like there's some brightness along the horizon, especially because 2020 and 2021 were pretty rough years overall structurally. Now we have complexity coming back, so at least we have that org presence and extra org in North America, right? Where extra salt kind of left, I guess it is an even trade, right? But still, um, I mean, do you feel like things are looking up? Because there's some good changes that we see Face bringing in. Koi actually is one of the FPL mentors, so
You
I
kind of
definitely see some
like
things are bringing it
yeah.
in.
It kind of depends on how you define like recovery. Um, will we like if anyone thinks we're ever gonna recover the scene to the point where it was like the complete ecstasy, like the ecstasy of NA CS:GO we had in like 2015 and 2016,
Hmm.
where you had like 10 orgs, like 10 big orgs all fielding teams of various skill, and we were having lands all like big lands all the time coming to NA, and money was just flying around. I don't think we're ever going to return to that or anything close to that. Like I think 3 big orgs in NA is all we'll ever have, and I think it'll fluctuate down to 2. Sometimes it'll go up to 4. But I think in CS:GO's lifespan, however much longer that is, like Counter Strike will never die, But if we're talking about like the current ecosystem, I think we're gonna stay at like 2 to 4 NA orgs in the scene for that's kind of what I think we can support right now, unless there's some like NA franchise league
Hmm.
or some big revenue share that comes in, or just, the scene has another golden age where it's just venture capital money is flowing like water, and you can just
Yeah.
kind of everyone can, support a team based on the wild speculative investment. But there are definitely like scenes that like the ECL level teams are kind of recovering. I know there's some things on the horizon where some of these orgless teams are getting support, whether that's just like short-term support from people in their lives, or some orgs are looking to sign them at, maybe a season at a time, or these players are just getting more financially comfortable.
Hmm.
Um, Things are looking up in that sense, but I still don't know necessarily like if we're ever going to have these ECL level teams be competitive internationally, which they never really have. I mean, the closest you probably got was a team like gosh, maybe like a team like ATK
Hmm.
when it was the OC floppy JT core that now is a complexity. That was probably the closest we ever got to having an internationally relevant like sub top level NA team. But I don't think that's still a few years off from having anything like that ever again, because you do look at teams like Party Astronauts, and while they do have incredibly skilled players and incredibly interesting lineups, they go to Europe and they usually just get smashed.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's kind of just the order of things because their play styles are very predictable. Janji's play style doesn't really work in Europe. They're not quick enough. Their playbooks aren't deep enough. They don't have enough. They don't have enough hours that
Hmm.
dedicate to the game as these full time European squads do. But things are definitely better than they were in 2020, and it does make the scene more enjoyable to watch and to cover, because it's not just like one team so incredibly dominant. I don't necessarily remember what your question was in that sense, but it, is it just do I think NA is recovering?
Well, yeah, I guess that was kind of it. And you did mention some of the things like you talked about some of the support structures, whether it not be, orgs, but you do have
Right.
like even like the, just GoFundMe stuff, the merch branding
Mhm.
that people have been doing to support it. And then on top of that, I feel like Cash Cups have single-handedly funded, players to actually play, not necessarily even full-time, but have part-time
At
jobs
least
play.
part-time stay in the game, right?
Right.
And I do think it's gonna be really interesting, maybe like a year or 2 from now when Riot inevitably moves to like a franchise model for
Hmm.
for Valorant esports, because there's no reality in which 20 full-time NA supported teams. Like if you're outside of the franchise, just like we've seen in League of Legends, there's gonna be, if you're one of those teams that didn't suck up enough to Riot, or you don't have an LCS spot, or you don't know how to grease the right palms,
Hmm.
and you don't like Optic, for example. If Optic doesn't end up with a franchise spot, there's no way they're gonna stay in Valorant esports playing, the random crap at the bottom that Riot lets exist outside of like let's call it VCS, Valorant Championship Series or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
right? There's they can't like they can't survive, an org that big can't survive from bottom feeding. And
Hmm.
so once their portfolios open up and they, that would be the time right there for something like a new Flashpoint to come in, with actual competent leadership and a vision for the future and a budget to sustain, long-term growth. But that would be the time to like re-entice these NA orgs and say, all right, you missed out on the Valorant franchise slot, but let's try to build something in CS:GO again. And that might be what the future holds.
Yeah.
But I definitely do think like we'll see even more players return in the next, 12 to 24 months when Valorant when the gate when the walls start closing in the Valorant scene.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's only so many spots, right? And like, obviously, I'd imagine that those LCS orgs have a big, already foot into
Oh yeah.
to the scene. So I'm worried for what that's gonna look like. Obviously, I'm still worried about that scene, considering the just that casting and talent stuff that's going
Mhm.
on there.
Well, that's the hard thing too, is like 2021 for casters was such like a magical forest they could all
Yeah.
frolic through, and there were just so many gigs, and like,
Yep.
if you're a person like Upmind, if you're someone like Upmind, you had an incredible year because there was just so much stuff for you to
Yeah.
do, whether it was at the Riot level or below. But when they move to the franchise level, I don't know if there's necessarily a future for someone like Upmind, because are they just going to use the same talent they used from the LCS? Are they going to just create a new generation of people they can control. And I don't know if you saw the article about
Yeah.
Richard Lewis,
Richard
where it's like the
Lewis. Yeah.
theory about why like Sean Garris was ousted.
Hmm.
Obviously, and people like that, like solely people who came from our scene and moved on to that scene
Yeah.
aren't at that level. But is Riot gonna say like this person is who we want to be the face of our brand? And is it someone is it someone who we're gonna immediately be able to like have like a day one go move on from this point in our
Hmm.
franchise league? And I don't know. And let's say Upmind is one of the people that make it. What about the other like six people who are former CS:GO casters from NA in his social circle who don't make it? Where are they gonna
Hmm.
go? Are they gonna come back to CS:GO? Maybe, but is there enough jobs for them? Hell no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that
Yeah.
was my concern all the while, right? And that Richard Lewis article, I think, really put it well, and that was my big concern. And that's the same
Hmm.
case for teams, for sure. It's like kind of a correlating problem because you've given up a lot of
Definitely.
space in Counter-Strike to go and switch over. Even if it's like just a temporary thing, if you're obviously working both events, but at that level, you have to almost commit to one or the other, right? So
And I don't think Riot really likes when people kind of
yeah,
go,
that's a good
go
point.
CS:GO back to Valorant, go back to CS:GO, go back to
Yeah,
Valorant. I think Mimi is the only person who's really been able to bridge that divide where
yeah.
she's able to like do ECL and Valorant events. But is she someone they're going to keep around when they go to a franchise model? Who knows?
Hmm.
What is Riot want? No one really knows what Riot wants in terms of who's going to be the face of the brand in when they set up their franchise. Like
Hmm.
maybe she could be, maybe she won't. If she's not, will she be kind of stuck with Darth Mike, where Darth Mike has been in the scene for 5 or 6 years, and he's just now starting to see any form of upward mobility on the ESL hierarchy. But I don't know.
Hmm.
It's all very it's Valorant is a bubble, and it's eventually going to burst. I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, closing things up there, I guess we kind of talked about enough of the North American stuff. I guess not enough of the North American stuff because we're gonna head into match fixing.
We're gonna
Uh,
and there we go, and the penny drop.
there we go, of course. But I mean, I did want to cover this just a little bit because obviously you have quite a bit of experience just doing research and
Mhm.
things like that. So I'm not going to go too crazy into detail about specifics, right? Because I imagine that there's still only so much that you can let out in interviews. But feel free to say no to whatever you would like to if you can't answer
Right.
it right now. And that's an obvious. But I want to talk a little bit about it because it's a big project, right? There's a lot of ways that you can hide match fixing nowadays, and including like crypto and stuff like that, which is way above what I understand. But you need a massive team of journalists to try and uncover it, to do research, to try and gather some information, and in that, I mean, how was the process of formulating the team that you did? Because you did bridge a lot of gaps, not you specifically, but just bringing that team together in general. I mean, how were you guys able to work together despite some industry differences between
I
people?
mean, it's like I think we all kind of realize that we all hate match fixing and it bugs the shit out of us. So any, territorial beefs. I mean, for me personally, I don't really like have any issues with any journalists in the scene. I feel like CS:GO journalists in particular.
Yeah.
I'm kind of apolitical in that sense. Like I like some people more than I like other people, right? But I'm willing to work with anyone to further the agenda of
Hmm.
getting rid of match fixing in North America. So it kind of came down to just like a massive information sharing exercise between any relevant party who was interested in knowing what was going on, whether that's people like DK before he retired, Ryan Friend before we started working together,
Hmm.
Richard Lewis, really really anyone who was anyone in terms of looking into this. um we just kind of wanted to, especially because I will go on a miniature rant here where I will say ESIC is probably the most disappointing and structurally flawed organization ever to come to CS:GO esports in half a dozen or half a
Since the
decade.
CSPPA
It's see CSPPA. I feel like when they bumble around and they kind of just like stop existing for months at a time,
doesn't hurt anything.
nothing like the damage is minimal.
Hmm.
When ESIC kind of becomes a laughing stock in our scene and they don't publish an update on anything meaningful for 6 to 10 months, that does have an applicable effect to NA because
Hmm.
if the criminals don't see any police officers, well, if I tag up a wall with graffiti and there's no police car that sees me, I'm gonna try breaking into a pharmacy next time, and then I might go and rob a bank the next time if no one's there to stop me. So it's like Isak is kind of a laughing stock. You see, like, the only mentions they get on Twitter are people, derisory. Like, if Stiko posts about us, he's like, the world will find out this new scandal, and then people are like, "Hey, Isak," you like microphone emoji. And I
Hmm.
don't think they're like a malicious organization, right? But I just think they're like underfunded, overly busy, and kind of up their own ass a little bit because they're holding, this like convention and they're
Yeah, I
like
saw
publishing
that.
like white papers and they kind of think that they deserve I think they kind of think that they deserve this prestige in the scene that they haven't really earned because especially on the match fixing front. I mean, they've only banned 3 players while, publicly going on the record saying, "Oh, these guys are idiots. Oh, these guys are so bad at hiding their tracks. We're so much smarter than them. We're
They got
top,
the FBI on the
sports
case.
lawyers. We have direct line to the FBI. We're top sports lawyers and we've broken cases like this before in
Hmm.
football or whatever." And then, well, where's the results then, right? Like it's
Yeah, you got three.
the only bans they've ever published is because of the recording that was provided to me that I
Yeah.
provided to Isak. So it's like, show your work after it's been, I think, 35 months now of continuous investigation.
Hmm.
And, you use continuous in air quotes there because it's like, it's just incredibly frustrating because, like, I feel the journalists have been the ones, like, holding it down. And I mean, to be fair, since April 2021, there hasn't been anything that's really come across my desk that would suggest that match fixing is still a widespread issue. But at the same time, I wouldn't say how do I put this? I wouldn't say it's gone, but I think I mean EU is a shit show. Like I think there's still widespread match fixing in EU, but in NA I think the market has shrunk to such a degree that it's not really where you go to like where these Russian syndicates, where the Chinese, the Chinese mob, whatever you want to call it, the betting collectives.
Yeah.
I don't think they go to NA CS:GO to that's like where they're gonna make their pretty penny. I think they know that EU is closer to home. It's a lot easier. It's a lot less suspicious when a team ranked 130 takes a dive to a team ranked 120. Like it's very you can just kind of say like, oh, I guess we just weren't feeling it on the server that day.
Hmm.
But um I don't know. I'm definitely rambling on this topic now, and
Oh.
that will happen. Like you ask me about ESIC, and I'm always just like I can talk about it for hours because their just level of commitment, communication, and I believe they're iconoclastic like they don't feel like an inquisition. They feel kind of like an overworked like detective, in a sense that like we can't get everyone. We
Yeah.
can't get everyone. Oh well, I guess we'll just go to our convention now. Whereas you want someone who's the watchdog of like integrity to be like the kind of person who's like staying in the weekends, who's drinking the black coffee, who's like, I'll get that motherfucker. Like he's not gonna get away from me.
Yeah.
Like he has him up, he has a picture of like he has a picture of like Marved up on like a pegboard, and he's like connecting the dots and being like, he thinks he's so much smarter than me. Like,
Hmm.
because the definite thing is, like now that NA has shrunk so much, it's not an issue for us. It's an issue for Valorant too now, where it's like these players, match fixers, are playing at the top tiers of NA Valorant. So it's like you'd think ESIC would like at least understand like the gravity of that situation, but
Hmm.
they really don't. It doesn't seem like they really understand the gravity of any situation. And it's very frustrating because they would fall out of communication with me for months at a time when I was working to publish my report. Um, and I guess Um, closing thoughts on that. Like the way we were able to get what we were able to get out was due to a massive effort of all the journalistic stakeholders in North America. It was because of basically a random tipster, an NA player who dropped dime on his teammates and was able to help us out. And the recording, which ended up being like a golden bullet.
Hmm.
Um, but the biggest like issue I found when trying to like break other cases was so many players are just kind of they play ignorant and they play dumb in the sense that like, oh yeah, well so and so said he may have thrown this match. Do you have any proof? Well, no, I don't record our team speaks. Or it's like, well, why don't you record your team speaks if you think your teammates are match fixing? Or oh yeah, he said it on like a Steam log. Did you save the Steam log? Well, no. And I just don't know if players have like the education necessary to comprehend the fact
Hmm.
that like integrity issues affects everyone, and it does affect like investment, and it does affect you getting signed by an org. If an org doesn't think that a league is legitimate, they're not going to invest in a team that plays in that league.
Yeah.
So it's like I think players just kind of need to grow up and realize the sense that like you need to be willing to rat out on your teammates if they're compromising your earnings potential and they're compromising your shot at esports excellence. And with a lot of those players, like I don't think they really understand
Hmm.
that they don't. It just feels like a lot of stakeholders in the scene
Yeah.
don't care, and it feels like a lot of players don't comprehend the gravity of match fixing its existential threat to esports.
Oh yeah, it's already taken its toll. It's a little too late for that to even become a factor, right? Because
Mhm.
I mean, until we do find out a way to actually punish these match fixers, then like you said, it's just like there's no police. So why would you ever end? And even if it isn't the case that there's still like a rampant match fixing in North America, I think we've lost a little bit of that integrity factor, and
Right.
so it just is going to lessen interest all the while. Um,
Yeah, and I will say like one other talking point that I always give when I talk about ESIC is, well, no, of course I lost it, but it's kind of like the premise that you said like if these people aren't afraid of consequences, then the money they're making valid, it's worth way more than playing esports. It's like they don't fear bans in the sense, especially in a sense that I feel like ESIC has its priorities misaligned, but with what like we want as fans of CS:GO.
mhm.
I feel like for them, their end goal is to forward all this to the FBI and get some like juicy indictments and put these people before the court and be like, thanks to the efforts of the Esports Integrity Commission, Congress today has passed new laws relating to the legislation of esports integrity because
Yeah.
esports is important. And then, Joe Biden will sign and be like, I know what esports is. And ESIC told me, like, we're so, and then FBI is like, we've created a new esports integrity department headed by Ian Smith,
Yeah.
where like we don't want any of that. We don't care. Like I don't personally care if these players go to jail, if they get fined by the government, if they're dragged before a tribunal of judges.
Mhm.
What I want them to do is just ban the players so they stop playing my
Can't
fucking
play.
esport,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's
Like it's
that's
like
all.
that's all that's what
Yeah.
all I care about. Like
Mhm.
I want ESIC to say because when you there's different standards of evidence when you're trying to ban someone from playing on ESEA than when you're trying to bring someone before the FBI.
Mhm.
Like I almost feel like if ESIC has reasonable suspicion that someone is match fixing, they should just say we are banning this person based on reasonable suspicion.
Mhm.
It might not hold up in court, but
It's not
that
court. It's
that doesn't
UCA,
that
right?
doesn't matter. It's not
Yeah.
a court. It's the same reason why like a player will get suspended in in like football or whatever for any suspicion of malpractice
Mhm.
when like let's say like I remember there's this story I think Richard Lewis said on some show because I just like referencing him about the guy the English footballer who got like kicked off of his club for eating like a pasty or something like on the sidelines of
Yeah.
a
The
football
spot
match.
fixing.
Well, would the British government arrest him and try to prove that eating the pasty was like evidence of a conspiracy to commit betting fraud?
Yeah.
No, because there's not enough evidence. But the English Football League was able to just say like we think that something's fucky. Please leave our industry. And I wish we would be more brave to do that in our industry
Yeah.
because there's people who are like publicly accused all the time of being match fixers without any like reservations about it. People like I'm just gonna say it like Marv. Just today, Steele is on Twitter like saying like, "Hey, at least you admitted you're a fixer," in an unrelated clip.
Yeah.
But when the criminals are willing to, when people are willing to just like say like this person's a criminal and we know this person did X, then it makes you really wonder like why ESIC hasn't been able to like do more on that front, right?
Mhm.
It's all very confusing and all very disappointing. I think that's kind of the confusing and disappointing are the two words I would probably use to describe ESIC.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was gonna be my next question. Is talking about what it was like to put that sort of effort with the team that you had, and then have those sort of results. But you already answered that. So
Well,
you're a
I will
lot.
I will say like one more thing in that front is we were ready to go with our report in January of 2021.
Mhm.
We weren't able to release our report until April 2021 because of what because ESIC requested we didn't do that
Was this
because
the
they said it was
report with
the match fixing
yeah,
report,
okay.
the big
The
one,
big one.
right?
Yep.
They, their whole thing was like, oh, please don't publish a report because it'll infringe our investigation, and any releases might make people like duck for cover and run for the hills. And that was, and we're like, okay, well, that makes sense for us because they were publishing these big grandiose numbers like, oh, we're going to try to ban like hundreds of people across the whole world for match fixing, and 80 plus NA players are going to receive these bans for, irregularities or whatever. Or, we're iconoclastic. We don't care about the views of our scene. And am I dropping
Yeah,
off, I
you dropped
think?
it out a little bit. We dropped out of iconoclastic a little bit.
Like, we're iconoclastic in a sense that we don't care about the views on our website more than we care about the integrity and the scene we love.
Hmm.
Because once again, it's not about the money for us. So we're like, yeah, sure. He's like, we'll wait. But like, when do you think this report's coming out? And they're like, oh, a week, a
Hmm.
month, 2 months. Oh, just give us another week. And it gets to April where we're like, okay, like we need to go with this because these players have been able to play a whole season
Yeah.
of Premiere without,
Any
well,
repercussions?
we know that they're match fixers. And personally, I will never do that again. Like, if I find something that I can use to indict a player in match fixing, I'm never gonna. I'll send it to ESIC, but I'm not gonna wait for ESIC to
Hmm.
give me their permission to post it. I don't need their permission. I only did it as a gesture of
Courtesy.
goodwill,
Hmm.
and they repay that goodwill by 35 months in, not delivering on anything.
Yeah. I mean, that's
It's so
fair.
it's all like if I had to give general advice to journalists, it's like just if the powers that be don't want you to publish something, make sure they like say like, okay, like I'm gonna give you 72 hours to get your shit together. Don't give them 4 months to wait because for us it didn't do anything. It hurt, like our actions, as good-willed as they were, hurt the scene more than it helped the scene because we literally let match fixers play for an extra season of Premiere instead
Hmm.
of getting them banned immediately because the evidence we showed was enough to get them indefinitely suspended, as proven by what happened with ESIC. So if we could have had them indefinitely suspended in January instead of April, we would have been much better for it, and nothing else would have changed, as evidenced by the fact that no more players have been banned by ESIC. So in that front, like that was definitely a bit of a blunder that we reflected on.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. And speaking of advice, I know you got to work. You've referenced him. I've referenced him quite a bit, but you got to work with Richard Lewis, and I know that I mentioned this with my last interview with Darth Mike because there was some role overlap in terms of hosting with him,
Mhm.
where he's kind of filling in. You talked about finally seeing Darth Mike at Tier 1, the ECL. I don't know if he was at ESL
I
Pro
think it was
League,
at
but he
I
was
think it
at
was at
Kato
he
as
did
a
like a C stream for Pro League, I believe,
Oh, okay,
recently.
sweet. Yeah, so he's casting for Pro League, and he's been at Kato as a host as well. So, I mean, there was role overlap there where Mike mentioned that he learned a lot in his hosting ability. So, I mean, getting to work with him during this ESIC, was there anything that you learned from him or any of the other journalists,
From
really,
Richard Lewis.
or anybody?
I
If you,
mean, like I'll give a moment on Richard Lewis. Like
yeah,
he's literally he's the greatest to ever have done it, right? Like he's the fucking goat. Like anytime there's any journalistic issue, I mean, the first time I got to talk to him, it was so nerve wracking, right?
yeah,
But and people will talk shit all they like, but he is probably one of the nicest people in esports. Like every time
mm,
I've talked to him, it's just been a pleasure. He's super down to earth, and he's beyond just the diplomatic niceties. He's one of the smartest, he is the smartest, most tenured journalist in esports. And the advice, and anytime he gives you advice, it's incredibly valuable. And anytime he even lets you give him information, you know that like he respects you as a peer. And it's like I've had the privilege of being able to talk to him, a couple times, whether through text or through audio, and it's just it's been incredible, getting a chance to work with him, um, and just the ethics advice he's given me, the uh, the writing advice he's given me occasionally, just the chance to hear his perspective on certain issues, the way he sort of the way he observes like he observes relationships between entities is it's I would say, like, if you had to come up with a word for it, it'd be cynical. But when you say someone's cynical, you mean like they're looking for the negatives and things that don't exist. But for him,
Hmm.
it's the things do exist. So I'd say intuitive, like negatively intuitive in the sense that like when you present to him evidence of unrelated like corruption in esports, his mind always goes to, well, what big stakeholders, say for example, like who at Faceit knew this was going on and didn't report on it, or who at ESL knew about this and didn't going on. And that's an incredibly valuable perspective to learn from someone like that, where it's like if like for with the match fixing thing in particular, you're saying like, well, 4-pack and Recchi match fixed, and the fact that I'm able to find it out as still a relatively small journalist at the time means that there's a very small chance that ESL or ESEA didn't watch these demos and say something's fishy. Well, if someone at ESL saw this demo and said this is fishy, why did they not do anything about it? Why did they not put out a public statement? Why did they
Hmm.
not refer it to ESIC? Why did they not suspend them with their unilateral authority as a tournament operator? Does that mean that they're complicit in it? Does that mean they're profiting from it? Does that mean that they are, that they're indifferent to it
Hmm.
because they're a publicly traded company and losing stock valuation on having a scandal in your esport that hurts the bottom line? Does that mean they value money more than they value integrity? The answer is yes, by the way, for ESL, but just being able to have someone kind of introduce you to those perspectives about looking at the larger picture and how all the cogs fit together in esports is invaluable.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, I guess you talked about it a little bit, and you mentioned like, is it just an ability to recognize like this business has this sort of interest better than other people, or is that the skill that he provided?
Um, yeah, I mean,
Because
because obviously he's in.
you mentioned like the relationship aspect. It was that had anything to do with it? Because the relationship between
What do you mean by
entities.
relationship? Can you
I mean, what struck to me was the relationship between entities as like one of your highlight points about him, right?
right?
So like, is it like you said, ESL, they have an incentive to do this and that? Like, was that what he
Yeah,
offers up as just a general, and even not for
just a
ESL,
general
but
just a general insight. Like he sees the bigger picture, and when you talk to him, he kind of invites you to see the bigger picture. I would say because
hmm.
it's in anything, obviously there's no, nothing is disconnected from cause and effect in esports. So it's like anytime something happens, people react at all levels of esports, whether it's, the choices between what stories you do and don't write, the choices between what decisions you do make as a tournament organizer, the what players you sign on an org because of their past reputation. Like, is it weird if an organization in Valorant, if these orgs in Valorant like Envy, don't tell me that, Hashro doesn't have the resources to ask someone in the CS:GO scene, whether that's a journalist, whether that's ESIC themselves. I'm sure if he needs to, he can get a direct line to ESIC, to the CSPPA, to whoever, and say, I've heard some rumors about so and so. Should I sign them based on those rumors? What's like the actual, like, cut through the bullshit? Tell me what like the actual on the ground reality is. And obviously Envy didn't. I don't think did anything with that in that
Hmm.
sense at all.
Yeah,
And
they just
that's,
weren't interested in actually punishing or anything like that.
the ripple. I think it just teaches you to like view the ripple effect of esports in a sense that every actor has a reaction to a circumstance, and you need to pay attention to how every single person in the industry reacts to something, and what does their reaction tell you about how this is being perceived, what the, industry leaders are going to do about it, and what aren't the industry leaders going to do about it. And it's all very enlightening just to talk to him and to, listen to, like, it's interesting in the sense that like he is as he is in his podcast. Like there's no character. Like Richard Lewis doesn't have a character. He's like I said earlier, he's incredibly down to earth, and the way he interacts with the community is the way he interacts in his videos. And
Hmm.
it's just like it's someone who I'd say is like is like an aspirational figure for me in terms of like the no nonsense, the no bullshit, the commitment to like excellence.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree. That's what I've noticed, at least from like an outsider's perspective, always watching his sort of content creation and stuff like that. So I appreciate the insight there, and again, I appreciate you taking the time to do
Yeah,
this
of
interview.
course.
That's pretty much everything I have for you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about or shout out before we head out?
Um, so I mean, I don't know. So in terms of my content plan for the future, I know. So I have this interview I'm trying to put out. I think I mentioned it earlier when we were doing our show prep.
Yeah.
I have an interview with Truth from ATK coming out soon, which is now I think 2 weeks old, but we had some incredible tech issues with it. So watch this space in the next 24 hours. It should be out. I know we have some plans at WS to increase our coverage of events and do like more watch parties and
Yeah.
bring more guests on and do stuff like that. So that should be
Your Mar was
exciting
so cool.
opportunity. Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was definitely an experiment. It was definitely an experiment for us. A lot of what we're doing at WS isn't new for a press outlet, but it's experimental for us. Like it's
Hmm.
things we've never considered doing before.
Yeah.
We're gonna try. I know our goal is to try to basically send someone to any time there's a relevant NA team at an event. So the goal is to try to get someone out to Romania, get someone out to the major, get someone out to Dallas, wherever there's opportunities to promote NA esports, we want to be there or be on camera or be behind a keyboard. um I know I did this with Darth Mike's Power Hour where I made all these promises about specific content pieces I
Yeah.
was gonna put out, so I'm not gonna do that again because I don't
No
think
max
most of that
rounds
shit
30
I don't think no, I don't think
promises.
most of that shit materialized, so I'm not gonna like make any broad
That's fair.
promises. But I definitely want to I definitely want to do more in
Hmm.
terms of like more interviews, more experimental content, more opinion,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Yeah.
Again, like you said, I think that I value your opinion. A lot of people in the scene value your opinion too. Again, I think you should keep that up. I want to encourage you to do that. Max rounds 30 was
All right.
fire, and so yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And that has
Of
been
course.
the interview. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the video, and of course check out all of Jeff's or Mnmzzz stuff that he's been mentioning. Check out Dust 2 as well. And thanks for coming on.
Of course.